Okay, this is lecture 2, Rhetoric and the Act of Rhetorical Analysis, part 1. What is rhetoric? Aristotle tells us the faculty of observing, in any given case, the available means of persuasion. So, the second question would be, what is rhetorical analysis? In rhetorical analysis, critiquing the symbols and meaning of persuasion, making arguments about what is being communicated and how an artifact might be persuasive. And it's more than a description. So, how does one engage in rhetorical analysis? In other words, how is rhetorical analysis performed? Well, it's a three-step process. First, you pick a text or an artifact, and then you come up with a research question. So, in lecture 1, I talked about the movie Friday. So I would choose Friday as an artifact, as a text to examine. So my research question, or one of my research questions for Friday might be, how does the negative representation of black males or black male bodies in Friday impact the social lives of black men in everyday in the everyday public? So let's move on to the next step. Then you have to choose a rhetorical perspective. Like, what lens are you going to look at this artifact through? So there are different ones. You have the feminist perspective, you have the neo Aristotelian perspective, you have critical rhetoric. Any of these are perspectives that you can use to examine the artifact. And so, lastly, using the rhetorical perspective of your choosing, you begin the analysis of the text or artifact by using description, interpretation, and evaluation. So, we need to burn this into your conscious. This is another way you come up with your topic or your research question. It's by looking at the context, your audience, and your topic. This will help you perform your rhetorical analysis. How so? What helps you make a selection of a text? So let's look at context, which is your frame of reference. Or who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? Who are you trying to persuade? Who are you talking to? And then what is your topic? So I'll use my research as an example. I'm an African American male. I come from humble beginnings. I played a great deal of competitive basketball growing up. I went to a great high school. I attended 2 black colleges. I've had more than my fair share of running with the police or law enforcement. I love cinema and film. I love sports. This is my frame of reference. This is my context. That circle to the left. When I do my research, the audience I focus on are marginalized groups. So that's people of color, women, the queer community. My research centers around black male bodies. So that's kind of my topic. That's my area. Specifically, representation of black male bodies in mediated text. This helps me. This is how I do my rhetorical analysis using the context, the audience, and my topic. I come up with what I want to study, my research questions, and how I perform my rhetorical analysis. So my rhetorical perspective is usually um, critical rhetoric, right? And critical rhetoric is an orientation that encompasses a number of perspectives that examine how texts create and sustain the social practices which control the dominated. So the lower class citizens, the poor, the non one percenters, you can say, you critique those social practices like stop and frisk, right? Stop and frisk in New York is horrible. Um, the same thing goes on in Arizona, where if you're a person of color uh, with brown skin, you could be stopped by the police officers. So you critique, like that's a policy you would critique. A policy in New York, like I just stated, is stop and frisk. They have a right to stop and frisk, and they usually racially profile African American males, and they stop them. You can frisk them and handcuff them. So that's why I use critical rhetoric. So let's go back and look at this slide. Okay, so let's say we use the visual pleasure theory, which we'll get into uh, down the line. Visual pleasure theory focuses on the messages communicated through visual images. So let's look at the young lady holding the Dasani bottle. This is in an ad, right? So remember, if you know what denotative and connotative is, we will get into that later. So we're looking at this in an ad. Dasani is trying to sell us water, right? Water's good for you. Okay, so Dasani, who is made by Coca-Cola and distributed by Coca-Cola, they have this picture of this young lady holding a bottle, right, next to her mouth. So selling sex is a, and we're going to get into that when we get into visual pleasure theory, is a thing a lot of companies try to do. So you can look at the sexual suggestions in this picture. She's holding the bottle like it's a phallic symbol. This is what is being communicated. Like, how are we being persuasive? She's holding the bottle. She's happy to be holding the bottle because she's smiling. The bottle is not in her mouth. She's not drinking. You don't see water yet. But the bottle can represent a phallic or a penis that she is happy to be holding. This is when we do, this is what we call rhetorical analysis, when you're arguing about what's being communicated, and how an artifact might be persuasive. This is more than a description. We wouldn't write this up. The young lady has brown skin, black hair. She has one hand holding the bottle. The Dasani label is pointing toward the camera or the television. That's just a description of what's going on. Um, you want to get into more than just the description, right? So, so what is rhetorical analysis? Rhetorical analysis advances a position by applying a theoretical perspective to an artifact so that you can understand how the artifact is constructed to be persuasive. So we just went over that, young ladies. Um, assert a claim how the artifact might communicate persuasiveness, right? So, what will be your claim in the ad I just showed you? This ad right here to the left, the young lady. So, a claim could be something like, Coca-Cola uses sexual images to sell Dasani water. So how you would have to unpack it like we already did. Find a communication theory, which we did, visual pleasure theory, probably the male gaze. We'll get into that later. That provides a framework for understanding. Identify the data of the artifact and interpret the data with the theory to prove a claim. So, Neo-Aristotelian criticism. This is a rhetorical perspective. So this is the artistic proofs, the development of symbols that persuade. And what helps that is ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, logos, logic, probability of reason, and evidence. Persuasive techniques that speakers or orators use to persuade or impact their audience. That's what Neo-Aristotelian criticism is used for. So basically, this is critiquing speeches. So the five canons of rhetoric um, are used. If you've taken public speaking already, you know them: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. These are used to help persuade an audience. So if you look at the artistic proofs, you see like credibility. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. So you're thinking the doctor there, since he's a physician, he's selling the cigarettes. It's applying like he or doctors feel that these cigarettes are the healthiest cigarettes you can smoke. Now, this is appeal to authority. It's kind of a logical fallacy, just the picture itself, because doctors, even though they're physicians, they don't know anything about cigarettes or the making of a cigarette. But this is still lending ethos in this ad. Like, look at this doctor. You know, he smokes Camels, so Camels must be healthy. Then the next one is pathos, is emotion. Everybody likes a cute baby. So you throw the baby on there next to the tire and you're thinking like, oh, how cute. That's an appeal to emotion that will help you make a decision to make a purchase. And then locals is logic. Traffic report. Over 21 million victims of human trafficking are trapped worldwide. Learn more, right? So this is logic, this third picture. Get involved because it makes sense. So when we put this all together, you know, when we're writing, right, a paragraph is an argument. So what does a paragraph argument look like? Sentence one is a claim. So look at the bottom. I argue this is persuasive because Apple Pay makes your life safer. Now, they have Jennifer Lawrence up here. That's the artifact that we're using to examine. Sentence 2 and 3 are the theories. Classical notions of ethos identifies an essential aspect of persuasion. So you have to have a citation after you make a statement like that. Using character witness that seem like you will be particularly effective. So that's your theory. What is the evidence? The ad shows Jennifer Lawrence wearing an Apple Watch. The ad asserts that she wants to be safe. Because if the Apple Watch is safe, you know, you can draw that conclusion like this young lady wants to be safe. So then it's interpretation. By using Lawrence, a beloved Hollywood star for this particular context, you have to cite, Apple Pay borrows her likability. She experienced a cyber hack of her new photos that caused her embarrassment. She sought a new system that would provide her the best protection. Her trials seem familiar to what you face as a non-famous person. If she appears willing to trust Apple Pay, the viewer should likewise trust